Cheers, everybody, and welcome to your favorite late night Friday night Hashcast. It is Variables with your hosts Fergoli, Pedro, and Superior Bud, streaming live every Friday night here on YouTube, Twitch. What's the other one? X.com, maybe sometimes Instagram if we can get that one figured out, and everywhere after the show on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Tonight we got a very special guest, Chase from Hashy, also known as Hashy.so. Definitely check out that URL. We'll be going through it tonight. Maybe you can give us a brief introduction, Chase. Tell us about what you got going on over there.
Yes, my name is Chase, and I'm helping hash makers track data and working on a company called Hashy. So yeah, we're focused on the digital side of hash making, and I'm from Los Angeles, and yeah, super excited to be on with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you for sure. Should be some good conversation.
Definitely. So we've definitely got one very data-driven nerd down here in this show, if you didn't know already. And I definitely like to collect it too. I see the value in that, and I think the way that technology and AI and all these things are going nowadays, it's like you'd be a fool not to integrate it somehow. So. Give me the elevator pitch of like what exactly you're providing. So I know it's data driven, and that's important when it comes to hash making, kind of nailing down those variables. But like, what is it? Is it software? Is it graphs and charts? Are you providing hardware products? What do you got?
Yeah, so we have a freeze dryer monitor. That's our flagship product right now, and it allows you to automatically log data and monitor stuff. We also have a data tracking platform along with just a bunch of other tools that help you keep track of things and learn from your from your data. But the main thing right now is our freeze dryer monitor. And I would say the elevator pitch is really that we're focused on providing insights that actually help you make better hash. There's a lot of software out there that is for metric stuff or for keeping track of your business analytics, but there's not a lot of stuff that's focused on actually helping you make better hash, improve product, save time on that. And that's our focus 100%.
So you come from a perspective of actual hash making, not a business acumen, right? Because that, like what you're saying, it's a lot of it is data-driven models based on pricing and economics and things of that nature. But there's a lot of other variables, especially when it comes to hash making, and those things might get thrown by the wayside when from the artist's perspective or the artisan's perspective, right, Pedro? Like, you don't always have control over those things. So if you can kind of have something like this that might maybe back up your argument on why you need to do things a certain way, like, is that kind of where you're coming from with it? Is it all about making better hash, or is it about the return on the hash? Because now we're talking back to the business side of things, right? It's not just return focused.
I would say the focus is really simply helping you keep track of yields and different performance of strains, particular types of resin, whether it's in the freeze dryer, on the press, in the wash vessel, to help you make better resin and at the end of the day, probably better business decisions. So we, our ideal endpoint is passing some type of CSV to the metric guy. We're not really interested in getting into that whole side of Microsoft Business, BI, and the metric software. We're way more interested in sort of the product improvement aspect. And yeah, for now, the foreseeable future, I would say everything we're going to do is about, connecting to different parts of the cold room and helping you figure out, really just what's happening with each piece of equipment and how you can make repeatable recipes if you get a product that comes out really good, or figure out, what specific parameters a given strain or batch size needs. So it's kind of really it's kind of up to what the maker wants. Some people are focused on hitting the 99.9 percentile of resin. Other people are focused on hey, we need to get super efficient, but also do high quality. So it's kind of flexible, but definitely more on the product improvement and very specific to the cold room versus the entire business side of things, I would say.
The recipes were a big one that I saw too with your software, right? Being able to actually set your freeze dryer parameters based on your batch, save it off, kind of like what you can do with the washers. Repeatable results, so you can change your settings. You offer more settings controlled in the base Harvest Right software, correct?
For the Harvest Right, it's just a monitoring and data analytics device. So no, not now. Maybe one day, as we're now pursuing the remote control. But to be totally honest, we also have a device for the Hull and Green Science, and for now, that checks all of the boxes as far as what we would want to see control-wise with a freeze dryer. So, our goal is not really to get into the equipment game, and we just want to focus on software. So it's really tough. I could see us doing it for Harvest Right in the future because there is a lot of value there. But at the same time, it's almost like pushing something too far that wasn't designed to necessarily be doing that. And without changing other aspects of the internals, I don't know that I would be confident like totally overriding the system as a hash maker. It's technically possible, but like
it's kind of like
we don't know.
overclocking your GPU or something like that, right?
Exactly.
It's like we're just gonna come in here and fucking make this thing rip, like
screw
your warranty, but
So I could see it. We're testing it. We've messed with it in the past. But also at the same time, the Hull and Green Science does offer that level of control where kind of like you're saying, you can see what's happening with your runs and then know how you need to iterate them. But you can also do that with the Harvest Right, to be honest. Like I always say that having the control of a Hull and Green is nice, but you can still make incredible hash with a Harvest Right. And there's still also a lot that even with only altering shelf temps and times, just by pulling it at different times and changing your approach to it, you can really drastically modify the end product and the quality. So stages are nice, but definitely not a requirement to still, be able to customize that recipe to an extent.
What's the difference in price for the? I've seen them. I believe I've looked them up for the more commercial. I don't want to say commercial. I don't even know what you would call the
more
high end,
tried and true,
industrial. I guess would be the word. Maybe
I would say it's like on the spectrum, it's probably like professional to prosumer. I think then you have the super high end ones, a Lab Conco that are 30 to 50K, and we don't even know if really those are optimal. But this is kind of slotting, I would say, between really like a Harvest Right Large or XL, and then some of those higher end units. And the breakdown is basically Harvest Rights, I'm sure you guys already know, but up to an XL are basically going to be like $5,000 to $6,000, depending on the deal and the pump configuration and all of that. The Hull and Green starts at, I believe, 6,500 with the oil pump. I am not 100% sure. With the more expensive pump, it goes up to like 11 grand. Gets very pricey. I don't know also between them, we don't have enough data on what is optimal between the oil pump and the scroll pump too. So like we're just starting to get our initial units out for these, and people use a mix of both, I would say.
How long would it take to do that testing? Like, is it a certain number of runs? You want 100, the sample size, I guess is the word I'm looking for, before you're confident in, that type of hardware?
Well, I think with a pump, it's interesting because the main thing that you're looking for is like reliability. And so like on the Harvest Right side of things, the pump will have a large influence on the vacuum that you're able to pull. And then
in terms of like the depth of it, like how deep of a vacuum? Okay.
And deeper is not necessarily better, but we can go into that later.
Fair
on
enough.
The Hull and Green side, you can control the vacuum. So at the end of the day, the vacuum pump might matter less on the Holland Green because you can control that. So I don't know that there's a huge difference between
That's interesting.
the scroll pump and the oil pump from a performance perspective, because you're going to want to back it off anyways and pull a pretty gentle vacuum.
I was going to say it's going to be time to vacuum is your biggest benefit, but you don't want to pull it too. I mean, you're just going to
time to vacuum and just reliability. You know, like I will say, and I always try to give very like transparent reviews and perspectives of things online. So I will say, you know, amazing reviews on the Holland Green so far, but just today, customer who has one, they have one of our devices as well. They had some issues with an oil pump, so we brought them the scroll pump. You know, so I do think that's more of an example of like, you're probably never going to have issues with a $5,000 scroll pump, but with an oil pump, you're going to have to do maintenance and you might have issues, you know, but are you still going to be able to do all of the same recipe control and all of that stuff? Yeah. You know, it's just like,
but at the cost of potentially not repeatable results because you don't have that consistency in a portion of your equipment, which is that level of control over the pull of with the scroll pump or something like that. But again, you know, you can also overdo it, right? So it really is like it's a balance of having a consistency of the equipment and then also the control over it. But you know, there's a little bit of that like maintenance factor in there too, because you know, who wants to be spending 10% of their time taking care of their equipment when they could be producing more hash, you know, like I get it. And that's where that economics come in, where the investors are like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Like you know, like there's this fight between like spending the dollars and then like maintaining the dollars, you know. And most of the time, they don't want to maintain the dollars or spend the dollars.
I was gonna say until they see the maintenance costs start. Well, wait a minute. How come we were down on this freeze dryer for 2 days because we were waiting for a gasket because we had to do maintenance and the gasket was busted. You know.
Yeah.
And then you're fucking, well, what's your hit on your processing capability, depending on your number of freeze dryers.
Your capacity now is only at 75%. You know what I mean? Those numbers start dwindling very quickly in terms of
that's the way to get the investors
happy And unfortunately, you know, when it comes down to making or spending this kind of money and making it, but spending this kind of money, you know, you usually have someone to answer to. These purses walking around with mouths on them, and you got to feed them or you know, talk to them and make them happy one way or another. So what's like the if I wanted to dive into this today, Chase, and you know, maybe I'm like, let's say I'm a commercial facility and I've got or maybe I'm just a very passionate hash maker, and I've spent, you know, $5,000-$6,000 already on, you know, Harvest Right, and maybe a, you know, minor upgrade or two for it, or some couple repairs, 3, 4, 5 repairs, you know, since I bought it. What are we looking at in terms of diving in with your tech and really kind of like upgrading it to the point I can have this level of control?
Yeah, so our device that covers all Harvest Right models and versions of firmware is $500. There's a new one that we're going to be releasing soon, which only will work on the newest Harvest Rights and version 6 and up, which is also a whole rabbit hole. And that is $150 now for pre-order. And then the Holland Green one is a bit more, but that one's done in official collaboration with them. So we're going to be able to do more interesting stuff down the road.
Yeah, that seems like it's a beneficial relationship mutually to be tied in with someone like that. You know what I mean? Like you're almost like their R&D department, you know, providing them with some level of you know, upgrades, and you know, rather than like internally producing them. I think about these video games a lot. This is sort of tangentially relevant, but a lot of times video game developers will see all these like mods and these things that, you know, other people have developed for their game to make it better, and they're like, oh, well, maybe we should have done that. Patch number 0.3962.72a, you know, guess what? Well, we just put this other like mod developer out of business because we just included this in our, you know, framework of our game now. I don't think that it's going to be the scenario with you, because I think there's always like, the advancements you can make, and the fact that it doesn't just apply to harvest, right? You've got more than just one freeze dryer. I'll be honest, I'm not very familiar with Holland Green. I come from the BHO, the hydrocarbon side of things, so I'm not, I don't own a harvest right. I've seen way too many of them in my days and heard a lot of stories about them and seen them operating and whatnot. And shit, even the local Tractor Supply was selling them at one point. But is this something? Are there other players in this industry, in this market? Like, is it just harvest right? Is it just Holland Green Science? Are there
my super raw opinion is that harvest rate still dominates 98%.
Oh wow.
I would say, Holland Green is quickly becoming now the go-to for not even super big labs. I would say just even craft guys that are very serious about it. They're very quickly becoming the one that everybody is switching to as they break harvest rights. Then there's like a couple sleeper ones that are smaller companies. Stay Fresh, they're based also here in Los Angeles. It's like a harvest right competitor. And then Blue Alpine, another harvest right competitor. And all of those are basically some variation of auto dry. The Holland Green is the only one that's letting you do the custom stages. And then above that, you have, like Wave freeze dryers and Lab Conco and these other ones that are starting at maybe like 30,000 and going up. And that's where, like, I don't know, that's where you kind of lose me. Like, I just, I'm always skeptical. And like you were kind of touching on, like, a lot of companies have not probably looked at a ton of hash data on the freeze drying side. I would have to guess that we have by far the most data on freeze drying hash at this point. And it's just not something that a lot of the companies prioritize. They're focused on other industries. So to me, that's what's the most interesting about Holland Green Science is they're very receptive to feedback from hash makers, it seems. And if we can make that relationship even easier for hash makers to go from their recipe and optimizations to Holland Green to improve their product, then that's a win-win for everybody. Right. So I think that's what's promising. A lot of brands are switching to them and are super happy. And anecdotally, without me trying a ton of resin from both head to head or comparing COAs or anything like that, it does seem like it dries or has the capability to dry more in a more gentle way. So I think as people start to understand what they want out of their freeze drying process, it's one of those things where you start with like a point and shoot camera, and then you want to go up to a professional camera that has full customizability and everything. It doesn't always matter even to the end result. You can still both sometimes get to the same end result, but that it's mostly the customizability. So I see them, I don't know, I think harvest right will always still dominate because everybody for the most part is going to want something that you just plug and play, you press and you're done. I could quickly see Holland Green Science being the standard for anybody that is high-end craft or like mid to large size and up, but not everybody, And the other ones, I think they're just going to get phased out. Yeah. I mean, I can see Stay Fresh and Blue Alpine maybe getting customers here and there. And like, there's some hash makers running them that are happy, and definitely we hope to add support for them as well. But I think Harvest Right is just, they've gotten the supply chain so cheap, and they're in Home Depot, they're in Costco, it's just so easy now to acquire one that I see them being the standard. And then I think Holland Green's just going to eat the more expensive ones. At least what we hear from hash makers is that they are happier with the $11,000 Holland Green than they are with the $30,000 other machines, you know? So,
wow. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't see much of the small market, the small machines shifting much of the market at all over time.
yeah.
They're hitting the prepper markets pretty hard. And even there, they're still fractions of a percent of the actual market compared to.
And is that market growing? Here's my thing. It seems like that their target market is actually contracting, not expanding like it was at the beginning of the pandemic and before.
Right.
So I like I mentioned, I saw the Harvest Right freeze dryer sitting at the entrance of my Tractor Supply one day, and I just started laughing out loud to myself because I knew what that shit was for. You know what I mean? Other than making your Skittles big, but
well, and I mean, all the smaller companies haven't hit the problems that Harvest Right had already worked through at this point. Harvest Right went from small to holy shit pandemic volumes overnight, right? Everyone was buying a damn freeze dryer all of a sudden. And they were able to clean up the supply chain. Yeah, they have lots of problems, and you squeaky wheel, or they're noisy people when you got messed up freeze dryers. But they still have a lot of fucking units out there that are working flawlessly. It's just a numbers game at that point. But the small guys, they haven't hit, what happens when you have a bad part that comes in and you send out 500 bad ones, and now you've got 500 refunds to deal with. And how does that deal with a small company that can't take that financial hit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. When you got 98% market share, it's like you can kind of fiddle fuck your way through it.
Yeah, you can weather some storms.
yeah, man. It's a lot different when you're fighting for a 0.1%, and you're selling a premium product that's only targeting a niche community, and it's like,
I mean, we're a fraction of a fraction.
Yeah, the problem though is that that's where the innovation is. You know what I mean? Like that's where the players that care about the COAs and comparing, the end results and the all the variables along the way and trying to figure those out and how to improve upon them. Like I don't think that's necessarily happening to the scale we'd like to see when it comes to a company that has maybe a 98% market share, and I don't think it matters what industry we're talking about.
It's actually kind of funny. I was talking to the wife a week or so back and said, I wonder what the next innovation is. We talk about it all the time. We've asked everybody, right? Bubble Man, everyone, what do you think's next? So I just was like, what's Grok going to tell me? So I went and asked Grok. I was like, look, here's where we are. Here's how we make hash today. How do we do this better? And it came up with ultrasonic sound vibrations to shake the trichomes off and like tuning frequencies to dial it in it was pretty wild. And it like sourced parts, built the freaking machine. It was insane what it came up with.
It's going to take, I think for the advancement for us is going to take something, it's going to take scaling, something you showed us many months ago, Superior. And it was someone, you could probably pull it up a lot faster than I can even remember who this was, but it was someone that was tracking trichomes using artificial intelligence, right? And to be able to collect that macro level data, and be able to utilize machine learning and then come up with a way to harvest it. Like, yes, we'll get there, but like just saying like, oh, well, what's the best technology now? No, we need a lot more data. We need to know like how easily these things will fall off. What is the thickness of the necks of the trichomes? How big are the heads and where do we want them to go? Like there's a lot. At what day, flower is the most optimal time to initiate this process, this new processing, post-harvest processing process that we have. Gosh, I can't wait to see where it goes, because when we start talking about that like nano level technology, I think it probably is going to take something like that, because listen, guys, we're sitting here with trimmers that are 4, 5, 6 inches long with fingers that are barely like functional and compared to what a microscopic robot could do.
Right.
So I don't know where it's gonna go. I think it's probably a long ways out, And of course, it's going to take some scaling up, right? But
yeah, we're talking innovation, but Chase has a pretty cool little thing. I'd never seen this until you posted this over on X. Let's show off the.
Yeah, let me try to hold it up without.
I forget the name of it again, so you'll have to say it. It's a Leathen.
All right, so it's called a Leadvel, and it is essentially like a electronic version of ice in your rig, and it's just actively cooling a metal pathway in there for the vapor, and then you can hook up a normal nail, you can hook up your rig, or in this case I just have the stock hookah hose, so it's pretty interesting.
Traveling up and down. Actually, you've got it over on X posted. Good close up, right?
Yeah, I wish I could station it to do a live dab, but it'd be too precarious.
It's an interesting concept, though. It's just like a Peltier cooler on the inside, so it's chilling your smoke. It's got a nice pathway. Bubble Man's question really got me thinking, though. Does it I forget the word he used, condensate the terps back into liquid form from the vapor? Like, can you cool our smoke too fast?
I think he was thinking that it might be sucking it in, like similar to how a harvest right does, where then you could do a cold trap, but this is isolated completely, unless I misinterpreted it, where it would only potentially recondense on the pathway as it's going to you. But to be honest, I don't think it's that cold. I don't know, and we'd have to test it for sure, and I don't even know how you do that, but I don't know that it's
just hit it a bunch of times.
Cold.
keep fucking dabbing, you'll find out.
There's not a lot of reclaim that forms. That's the most fascinating. One of the most fascinating aspects to me was just how clean it is after many dabs. And I don't know if it's the metal they're using or if it's the temperature or that in combination with the metal, but that was unexpected for me.
Yeah, I would assume
I would assume a reclaim buildup somehow, somewhere. I would mostly assume it would be closest to the nail, in my thought process.
No, there's barely any. That was the most surprising part. I mean, even after cleaning it, I had cleaned it only once so far, but there was stickiness, no visible reclaim whatsoever. Very tiny amount on. Nothing like what you would find in a rig. Really? Nothing close to that level.
I wonder if it's the back and forth pathways slow the velocity of your draw enough that you're not.
Dude, it's very free breathing. Like I'll take a dab here in a sec, but like there's no restriction in the same way that, like, if you had a rig, a recycler or something, you would induce a lot of restriction, but this is, again, nothing close to that. It's like free breathing.
Yeah, that restriction is causing us to pull more reclaim in versus this is why you're not getting it. I don't know, just conceptual mind going. Like, that's an interesting thing. I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought it would have gotten full and gotten crazy to clean.
Yeah, I mean, my mind goes that even the neck of my banger has got reclaim resin. So what's making it stop at the end?
Even just the joint. Yeah. I mean, there's like barely any reclaim in the joint. And this is slightly cooled.
Here. Someone, where'd it go?
I'm just thinking hundreds and thousands of dabs. Like, I don't know that. I mean, just even in your lungs as well. Like, I don't know that there's any way to avoid the collection of reclaim at some point in time.
Well, if you had a rig with no water, a dry hit rig.
Oh, those suck.
Right, I know. But would you get reclaim like we get? I think that's the point Chase is making, where the water is causing us to we're hitting it harder than he's going to have to hit that free breathe.
This has water too, though. You can hit this with, you can hit it with or without water.
You're fucking up my theory, man.
Well, and I kind of was with you too, but even if I hit this dry, the base, you know, the nail goes in here, the base is going to have, call it what you want, reclaim,
right,
suck down fucking rosin, blah, blah,
oil, something. I just call them boogers.
I mean, I don't even know how you would test it because it's such a hard thing.
We talking reclaim?
Where I was like, we want to figure out how you can test the terps coming out of the hose on the other end, but that would be so hard to do. But I think you are still getting the reclaim. I just agree it's going straight into your lungs. Whether or not that's a good thing, I also don't know. But that's another part of this that's an interesting conversation. Is like, and we talk a lot about this with hash makers in the context of just making hash in general. It's like, is it a good, do we want to boil off certain terps in the freeze dryer? Do we want to boil off certain terps before they go in?
No, we want to keep all the terps. The terps are the most important thing. What are we even talking about? Kick this guy.
And the point that you're getting to is some terpenes are carcinogenic. Some of them are very volatile. Some of them enhance very bad asthma attacks in some consumers.
Just fucking hurt.
So yeah, while most people are chasing the terps, well, if there's some users and there's some people, you're absolutely right. At what point in time are these terpenes truly dangerous for us, and at what levels? And you know,
yeah, the example that I have given and talk about is, you know, I've tried a lot of rosin that tests at 8+%. I've tried a lot of rosin that tests between 3 to 5%. And there's no correlation between the higher testing terp jars being louder and better and tastier than the lower testing ones. Very simply because you could have a higher terp percentage of a terp that is not tasty. And the other one could be, you know, less, but have a higher percentage of a terp that is tasty. So,
but is that because you're altering the profile of the plant through the post processing that you're doing? Because you're talking about like having higher percentage of certain terps. That to me tells me there's something going on in the post processing that's changing it from what it was when it was a, you know, fresh frozen, or when it was harvested, or when it was in the soil or cocoa or what have you, right?
Might just be the plant as well, having or not having that terpene.
It's, I mean, I've seen makers doing both. I've seen cold cure that on its own just tests ridiculously high. I've seen people that are doing reintroduction of mechanically separated terps from rosin into it, and it's testing super high. And I don't know, again, like what is a good thing and what is a bad thing. And I'm certainly on the quest to figure it out, you know, but like, I will say just very simply, and, you know, I think most people have probably had similar experiences where like there are jars that test at 3% terps that are 10 times louder than a jar that tests at 8% terps. And there's a lot of different factors that could be going into it. The thing being like one dominant terp, or even, you know, the moisture level might be impacting it and pulling out terps and drying it out faster. So I mean, there's a lot of different things, but it is interesting. Like most people are just on the mindset of like, we need to preserve all terps at all times. And for the most part, yeah, I agree. Like try to, but also just think, you know, sometimes you might want to alter the profile. You might, when you're curing something, or when you're doing a partial cure on the vine before harvesting and washing, you are going to change slightly the profiles. So, I mean, everybody's on the same page with doing it to some extent.
Yeah, but you guys as hash makers, as solventless processors, just altered a lot more, right? Because over here in my little hydrocarbon corner, I am really trying to preserve the essence of the plant on the day of harvest. And I'm pretty fucking good at being able to do that. I've been able to get 12 to 15% terpene test results back on my sauce extracts. But guess what? That's not always a positive thing. Like Pedro and Superior have alluded to, people with certain asthmatic conditions or certain sensitivities to certain terpenes or just terpenes in general, flavonoids, etc., esters, right? They might not really enjoy it as much as some other people might, right? So like clementine, for example, is one of those ones that comes out at just a super high terpene rate. It's very like sharp, and I gotta shout out Pedro for that, because I would have never tagged it as sharp, but that really is what it is. It's a sharp kind of flavor, right? And so it really fucking hits. And it's like, maybe we can tone this one down. Just leave that fucking jar open on the desk for a day or two before you hit that one again, But I've also grown strains like Durban Poison that test in the 99th percentile that are coming out at 3.41, I think it was, percent terpenes by volume in flower, right? So think about concentrating that. It's going to be super high in terpenes. Now, like you're saying, doesn't mean that, keeping 100% of the terpenes 100% of the time is always the best way of doing it. But in my personal philosophy when it comes to growing and processing this plant is, I want to capture the essence of the plant on the day of harvest. And that means preserving those terpenes as best I can. Now, is there a what's the positive, I guess, to altering that profile? Because we're very capable, right? We know the boiling points, the sublimation temperatures of these terpenes, whether it be sesquiterpenes or monoterpenes or what have you. So we can kind of like alter that, play with it. We know when maybe we can test it right at certain weeks of harvest. So maybe we want to get a little bit higher of this one terpene at 7-week versus 9-week harvest, right? But my question is, what are the what are the benefits from altering that manually?
I think there's two ways to think about it. First, and really simply anecdotally, is I have tried fresh, and I'm sure you guys have too, fresh press versions of a strain that taste and feel much worse than the cold cure version. I've also tried the flip side, where sometimes the fresh press version is better than the cold cure version. So I don't know that one is better than the other. I'm on it's up to the hash maker to decide what they want to express. Sometimes, I'm with you. Like that plant, honey banana, on the day of harvest, keep it as is, don't change it. But I'm like, I don't know, if you have some straw nana, let it cure maybe and turn into a little bit of a creamier profile, because it's kind of disgusting fresh off the plant. But that's just my opinion. It's also, I always think about it like sushi, in the sense that I don't know, especially in the California market, chefs here, the best ones, are probably buying from the same markets in the same way that hash makers are buying from many of the same farms. So it's really the stuff that you're doing in terms of curing, your unique approach to drying, your how you press it, all of these different things are going to make it slightly more nuanced. That, to me, that's where the interesting part is. Sometimes maybe this batch you do want to tone down some of the strawberry notes, so you let it cure for a while. Other times, this one you do want to keep, again, a very accurate representation of the plant. So I'm with you that I don't know. I think it's like you have to know how to preserve it. I think that's the baseline. Start there and then get creative with it. It's just
that's a great way of approaching it, man.
I mean, is it kind of like aged meat, or leaving your
or
red
fucking
wine
wine?
your
man,
wine open on the counter for an hour before you start drinking it?
All right, Cabernet. We need 10 minutes over here with an open bottle.
I think what Chase just said was a long ass way of me coming around and just saying preference.
Right.
Literally, when I do and sometimes I guess yield and whatnot, but why would altering it become a good thing? Handling the terpenes and preference of the terpenes, I guess, would probably be the two easiest answers.
Handling is such a key thing.
Sorry. It feels like the artisan side comes out more there, where if we can start learning how to manipulate the terpenes at that level, now you can drive it towards a certain flavor profile after the fact. If you have the strength, you have everything, but it comes with a peppery note that you don't like. It doesn't mix with the food you're mixing tonight. I don't know. It's
So cure it for a week, and now you've got
Yeah.
something.
Hour on
interesting-
hour on the counter, fucking left out to air, gets rid of the peppery you know.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? There are definitely on the fresh press. I've got a post on the Instagram page that drew a lot of attention, and it was just simply fuck fresh press, because I don't like fresh press. Number one, I hate handling, and I think everybody that's ever handled fresh press understands it. But it's just very throaty to me. It comes off maybe too terpy, but I take that same cultivar, that same jar, cold cure it, and it's delectable, you know. But I just 95% of the time do not like cold cure.
I think fresh
Or
press.
excuse me, fresh press. Thank you.
I think a lot of I think a lot of it is like with my age, I don't like fresh press as much. Like you said, it aches my throat. It's a little the coughs are a little harsher these days.
There's something in there
Yeah,
about as you get older, you don't like the younger hash or something, but
Yeah,
you like
right?
you're cured like your hash is. I don't know,
What's the
something.
I can't think of the analogy.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
There's a phrase for it, I'm
I need
sure.
Grok to give me some copywriting lessons, I think. What I would Chase, is there something, you know, are you looking futuristic too? Like we often talk about, you know, what is that next innovation or whatever, like you know, talking about how this is so much preference when it comes to, maybe it's the artisan, right? That's got their preference of how he wants his product to come out, and that's, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit kind of situation. Or maybe it's a, you know, you're just buying off the shelf what you want to get, and you know, maybe you got some flavor preferences or some brand preferences or whatever. But for you, like when it comes to developing products and the R&D side of things, like where do you see this going? Like from your technology standpoint, how can you improve what, you know, we as hash makers and processors are trying to do? Like what is the next step here? I talked about nanobot, whatever AI technology. Maybe that's a little bit more futuristic, but
Now that you've got all the data, what's the next actionable item on the list?
Yeah,
right?
I think we're still in the data phase, and like we're very aware that a lot of this will be headed towards AI first, augmenting the hash maker, and then second, probably robotics, you know, and then it will start at a very high scale and then eventually work its way into the home and help you. So I think you know, we're probably thinking it will go that trajectory. And the step for us is still very much, there's so much amazing data that is in paper notebooks only, still on the top of mountains, that is never going to see the light of day. And if you ask the hash maker to reference it, they won't even know where to find it. So the first level one is like, let's make it really easy for a hash maker and their AI assistant to just like work together using their data. Hey, these plants came out really good last season. Try to do it this way this time. Simple stuff like that. The level two of that then is interesting to think about. I've always believed that, you know, it will kind of exist in maybe the way that like home brewing and even home roasting of coffee now exists, where like you'll have some people that always want to make craft stuff at home, and really high quality equipment for them is very interesting too, because we have a huge focus right now on like the highest scale production for the most part. And I think that is how most people will always consume. And even the best craft brands, you know, they're going to need high scale stuff, the equivalent of professional roasting stuff. But to me, there's also like this whole section of the market that's kind of neglected, which is like, what does a $5,000 espresso machine look like, but in hash, you know, like kind of a mid-range sort of thing.
That was the example I was going to give, dude. I started thinking about these things that I spend money on to like really enjoy. And it's funny because people that know me know I like to process things into something different, right? And so a lot of the gifts I get are something like coffee extraction equipment, you know, and things of that nature, right? just a totally different industry. But espresso is definitely one of those things that like I love every morning, getting up, processing my coffee, extracting it, right, frothing that milk.
My daughter called me a couple years back and was like, Dad, I know you always tell me wants versus needs, but I bought something for myself. And I was like, well, what'd you buy? She's like, well, I bought an espresso machine. I'm like, well, that's not bad. She's like, a professional espresso machine.
The water
I'm like,
lines are
wait.
hooked up. It's got a drain. It's automatic. The
I'm like,
hopper is 5 pounds.
How professional? And she's like, well, it was $6,500. I'm like, well, holy shit. How much coffee do you drink? Like, she still uses it though. So
dude, and that's just it. Like there are certain levels of craft even at home that you can get to, and like this isn't, I wouldn't say, a very expensive one. It's like my espresso machine is not a $5,000 espresso machine. It's in the hundreds. But my smoker also not in the thousands, but it's in the hundreds, and that has changed my level of cooking meats. I mean, I'm not kidding, at least tenfold. Like I cannot eat steak cooked restaurant cooked steaks. I'm so dyslexic. I cannot eat steaks cooked at restaurants anymore because I know what I'm capable at home. And it's just the same way. It's like Starbucks, guys. What are we doing here?
Traeger. We just did some pizza on the Traeger last weekend.
Dude. Hell nice. Yeah, man. It's just like everything, vegetables, corn, like you name it, it's just better. And take the time to figure it out, and maybe it's just the preference thing, right? But like everyone can do some level of craft at home when it comes to just about anything, and so if you want to kind of get involved in that hash making side of things, you got to make it affordable, but you also got to make it like a step above, because that harvest right is just you know what's a good analogy for that? On your what's a good char something grill, like some basic gas grill? I don't know.
Do you guys know Combustion Inc? Have you seen Combustion Inc before?
No.
You should look this up and pull it up, and after you should watch a lot of this guy's videos. And this is an amazing product. If you guys like cooking, you'll love it. This is where I would say we're trying to go, but we're still focused on the more broad aspect of making hash. So it's a little bit different. But in terms of how this guy presents data to people to just immediately make better steaks, it's amazing. It's like one of the best product experiences that I've personally ever had. So it's very much a North Star in terms of making stuff like really easy to access. And I think that's where the future is headed.
Mm-hmm.
To round out that, I think the future is headed right now to like the hash maker needs an AI assistant, which does all the data stuff and the headache and all the annoying things, so that you can just kind of decide what you want to make and how you want to curate a menu and what seeds you want to plant for next season. I think then in the future, my contrarian opinion is that we know it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger on the main side, but I think there are, what's interesting to me is will people ever be able to buy hash and press it at home on a nice press and then just dab it right there? Because that right now, I mean, you could do in theory, but you're going to end up with a very shitty, cheap press. And you're not going to be able to get quality hash to press unless you're growing it yourself. So then that becomes a whole nother rabbit hole. So it's this thought experiment of how far will it go? Are you always going to have to do everything, or will it get to a point like an espresso machine where you could get really good beans? You could pursue that all the way down to the rabbit hole where you're importing this shit, freezing the beans to make sure they stay pristine. Again, it's very deep. So it's
I like where you're going with this, because I think that's an important thing. You have to have a shelf-stable product that you can still turn into a premium, craft consumable, totally different thing, right? And so I can go buy one of my favorite beans right now for coffee is this Mexican blend that's got caramel coffee and whatever other note in there, and it's just perfect. It's right out my alley. You know what I mean? And throw a little butterscotch syrup in there, and you know, it's just like it's perfect. Should this not become available though, and I'm buying some other blend, I'm just now disappointed, right? So like having the access to it and then being able to create repeatable results, I think is important. But you have to have access, you have to have a shelf stable product. And how do you get that with cannabis? Because I don't think it's in the flower form. I think that's too bulky. And like you said, you have to then go buy what? You got to go buy like hash. You just got to go buy some 6-star hash that now you can go process at home. But I mean, that price has got to come down a lot, man, because I'm buying coffee by the pound and I use it by the ounce probably every morning. Like, you know what I mean? Like
we need a good way to store it and transport it too. That's
right.
a lot more economical and
well, it has to be concentrated, but it has to be shelf stable. It seems like it's, especially if it gets packaged in a way, it seems like maybe you might be right, Chase. It might be that kind of like pre-extracted. Well, it's like in the middle, right? Because it's been harvested and
it's just like coffee to me, where you have all different levels. You have some guys in LA who are growing coffee beans in their backyard, probably roasting that shit, you know, going through the whole thing. You have other guys who are just buying the best possible beans, making sure they stay perfect from shipment to, you know, in sealed containers. So I think it's like, you know, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's like someone said to me something very powerful that I always just think about, which is like so true, and it influences a lot of the decisions that we even make for producers, which is like people just want to get high. And like giving you your own hash to press into rosin is like not helping that process. I think there are going to be some people who want to do that. So when we're talking about the future of cannabis or solventless 10 years out, I'm like, yeah, the market lacks more of these like home premium things. You know, like a low temp V2 is like, I would put that on a counter, I guess, but it's also still pretty industrial focused. It's not made of concrete or like all, you know, these fancy things. So like, I could see that being a thing, but at the end of the day, people just want to get high, you know, and like the price of rosin is going to get cheaper. The flavors are going to get more diverse. And like, that's where we're headed, you know, as a whole. The other stuff though is interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's like if you're going out and buying hash, you're going out to the dispensary, you're going, you know, collecting hash, and then you're taking it back home to your, you know, probably $1,000 or at least several hundred, if not multi-$1,000 press, and then you're creating it into something. It's like, why don't you just go grow it yourself, man? At that point, you might as well just start growing your own shit. You know what I mean? Then that's probably, I think I got into it for less, you know, like I was just like, this shit's expensive. I might as well start growing it, you know.
Yeah,
I could see that becoming
flour, and then flour rosin leads to hash rosin. It's just sooner or later you got to start buying more expensive stuff, and yeah, it gets expensive to do it right. It would be nice to see it more economical for more. It would open it up for more people. I think you're going to see more people growing. It's just a matter of, do they take it past flour?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, solventless is really the only home market, if you think about it, that can like truly expand like that. I don't think you're going to see like miniature solvent-based labs for people. You know what I mean? Like that's just not gonna. Yeah. That's not going to go that route. So
the glass tube days are over.
Right.
Exactly. I think in 4 years, maybe 6 years, no one will smoke flower anymore.
Oh, interesting.
I believe that. Yeah.
You know how long this shit's been around, man?
Oh, I know. But I think what people don't factor in is that there are now millions of weed smokers who are, you know, let's say around the age of 21 that only think of cannabis as a vape pen or as a dab. Mm-hmm. They literally don't think of it as flower. It's changing very, very, very fast. And 4 years might be a bit optimistic, but I
Yeah,
think
if you
it'll only be rosin and hash and hydrocarbon
edibles
stuff
and
and
edibles.
edibles. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not
once you get edibles in there, you cover a good edibles and vape pens. I mean, how much of the market is that, right?
Yeah. I'm not a true denialist where I think only solventless will be a thing. Like I post that every once in a while, but I do think hydrocarbon is still going to lead a lot of the, like mass market production. And when done right, it's good and probably better that way for the mass market. But I think it'll only be extracts. I mean, when you compare the experience between the two products, and I will die on this hill, and I still smoke flower once a month or something. But I'm sorry, it's way better to smoke concentrates in any form than
I
it is to
agree.
smoke flower.
That's why I fucking started doing this. That's why I got into concentrates.
It's-
Even as a BHO guy, I knew that it was a cleaner end product. Should I be able to do it right?
Questionably
the
better
tech-
for you.
And as the tech gets better on consumption, that's why people have not done it so much and why flour has been the thing, because you can throw flour into literally any object and smoke it. With a concentrate, I mean, like just in the last few years have we even gotten really good carts. Like we're still far from what the final dabbing experience is. Like
Yeah.
98% of us are using torches still. So I do think though, as it gets better, Puffco is a good example. Like they're constantly innovating this shit. They've gotten it down to this form factor now where a few years ago, any connoisseur would have looked at this and laughed. And I had the first iteration of it and it was terrible. But now it's getting very good. And I think this is a sign of like, there's just no, like, here's my real opinion. It's like I will walk down the street and smell people smoking flower, and I'm like, yo, this is kind of disgusting. Like you should just be dabbing. I mean, there's nothing to me that is more pleasant about smoking flower. I can't think of anything.
There's a different effect you can get, and that is
You could get the same with water hash, I would argue.
I disagree because I think once you start, even
I
with the
side
same
on for
exact
Roy on this one.
strain from the same exact person, grower through the same exact process, however you want to look at it, I think you will get a different effect, and I think that's partly because things are getting pulled out or left behind or what have you. Dude, I'm the same way. I rarely smoke flower. I've been processing for nearly a decade now, and the reason I do it is primarily health reasons. And I'll tell you what, though, I do not mind going back to a nice bowl, a nice joint, and whatever kind of, it's just a different experience. I think that
But
doesn't make it my preference, though.
Do you think if you smoked pure heads at the same temperature that you combust heads on flower, would you have the same experience, or you don't?
No, it's a totally different experience, I think.
I argue that a lot of the experience of when you smoke flower is of smoking plant material. Good or bad,
Yeah,
it's a different experience because you're smoking the plant material.
I mean, like I have not smoked a lot of the same strain produced 3 different ways, so I can't speak on this with any high level of precision. But in my opinion, I have smoked water hash that feels a lot more like flour than it does like rosin. What rosin to me is very distinctly a rosin high. Water hash is kind of this in between where it's like more similar to flour, where you get that full kind of feeling, haze behind the eyes. I don't know.
Waxy lipid, I understand.
That I don't get so much with the rosin, but I do get a lot more with water hash. But I mean, I agree. Yeah, it's not the same as actually smoking flower, which to me is a much more sedative high always, no matter what strain.
Oh my God, yes.
But I mean, I don't like. Maybe I'm also just not smoking the best flower. I'm not at the level where I'm smoking the top shit. And maybe if I was, have a different opinion. But of the flower that I've smoked,
I don't know if that has as much to do with it as trying it and from the same source in multiple different ways, right? Like,
and it might be time of day different thing too, because I know if I come downstairs here and I take a dab right before I go to bed, but I'm hacking until 2 o'clock in the morning, in my sleep and just, whatnot. But if I come down here and I take a puff or two of flower, then it's much gentler on my lungs because of probably how much I have consumed. You get to control a little more. And like you said, it's more sedative. But I will argue that, like you said, with rosin to hash, the big difference there is that you're actually consuming the waxes and lipids in a higher concentration than you would be if it was rosin. And the hash to then flower is bluntly and just it's because you're smoking the flower. The plant material itself is going to have an effect itself, just with its own.
And maybe it's carrying things better, that you can absorb it more in your life. I mean, it could just be anything, dude. It could be literally anything. There's too many damn variables.
Well, and we say healthy, when smoking flower versus rosin or hash or whatever it may be, is the concentration in which we are consuming in a dab. Obviously, there's variables there and how the size and coolness and whatnot, but is that healthier in those levels? At those,
this is another one that I love to just talk with people online, because, like, obviously I love hash. I've done this as my full-time thing now for a long time, so I'm an advocate of hash more than most people. There's no way that it's healthy to dab all day, hot dabs, and just consuming terpenes in high concentration. And anybody that says that it is, I'm like, just look at any scientific study that has looked at this. Like, it's not. I mean, it's not good. And I think that it's all about, I hate to just ride on everything on Puffco tonight, but I do agree with what they say. Like, this is not about, their devices are not about getting people as high as possible. They're just they just want to give you the best possible pathway to cannabis, and they believe it's rosin dabs, whatever. Like, I'm kind of with that. Like, I think, is this probably healthier than a lot of other things that you could be doing? For sure it is, no question. Is it perfectly healthy to just be dabbing like 2 grams a day? I mean, I don't know. It depends what your definition of healthy is. Like, probably not that good. That is, though, to me also what's very interesting about, like, we've seen the average temperature of dabs come down, probably 500 degrees in the last 7 years.
Yep.
And
a lot more control over that temperature.
Exactly.
Yes,
and
yes.
I think we're just getting started still with scratching the surface. I would have to guess that, like, a lot of the e-rig companies are doing research on, like, what profiles, heating up, down, different patterns, different stuff like that are optimal. So no, I don't think it's healthy. I think that anybody that is like, oh yeah, I can just dab globs of rosin and then go run 10 miles and it helps me. Like, I mean, probably because you're high. Like,
hey, it's better than not running 10 miles. So if it takes you doing a dab to run 10 miles, guess what? You probably are healthier than the person that's not running.
It's true.
Or
that's very true. I think it's all relative, but is the person who's dabbing all day doing the same fitness routine versus someone who's not, I mean, like, yeah, it's probably not good. That's also what's interesting, though, from a product perspective, of there are things that you can do, which, Blue River Terps, I know, is doing. There's other brands that are doing that, are manipulating how much lipid, what the lipid presence is in the rosin, or what some of these other things are. Even just manipulating breeding, how thick the cuticle is might have an impact on this.
And that actually, to some scale, can have an effect on what strains even exist, because we tend to start breeding for these things, right? And if we start breeding out everything but super boof, well, then all we're left with is super boof. Unfortunately, I've got to take off a little bit earlier tonight, but I want to leave you with a question, because I think this is an important one, and you've kind of alluded to it to some extent, but I don't think we've really discussed it. And it can apply to just about everything we've talked about tonight. How do you feel about chemical versus mechanical extraction? Because you brought up robots, right? And being able to do some sort of mechanical extraction. Is that even necessary when we're able to do a chemical extraction and maybe, get the same results with less technology or expense?
It's a good question. And I really, I don't know where this stuff is headed. Every year, I think it takes a different direction than anybody expects in terms of like dry sift became really hot again. And a lot of people didn't see that coming. I certainly didn't. I didn't see companies investing in like full scale automation of dry sift. And I think already that phase is even now we're kind of on the tail end of that. And it's like it happens very fast in this industry, especially with solventless, where, as you guys said earlier, like this is the cutting edge. Shit is changing very fast. What is in style now might not be in a while. So I don't know. I mean, I think, chemical extraction has a really bad stigma for whatever reason, mostly marketing, if you really look at it, I think. And like there
And
was
history.
a lot of, yeah. And like there was a lot of fire live resin a few years ago that doesn't exist so much now because those brands switched purely over to solventless. So like, I think, I think solventless will probably be the bigger thing for the higher end of the market, and it will probably stay that way. I don't know that water hash, for example, is the pinnacle product, and I know that a lot of people think that it is. And if you're looking for the least, adulterated version of the resin, like you were saying you want to look for, then yeah, it probably is, just like air dried or freeze dried water hash. But like, I know thumbprints are also very controversial, but like to me, that's an indication more of where this shit is headed, of like flavor blends, doing experiences where you get partial cold cure, partial jam, and seeing how that changes the experience. And like I see that still going a lot further for now than the chemical side of things, only because it's so easy for anybody to do that. And you have a lot of these innovators in their garages and basements who are pushing this stuff forward.
It's easier for the chemical side to do it though. I've been blending strains for nearly a decade now. I've been creating
Questionably more accurate.
Post
I think it's
harvest.
easier, but not at a small scale. It's very
Not as
hard to.
It's not as accessible, I would say, for Girly.
Yes. I agree.
It's more about. It's more about the fear factor of it. Like,
sure, yeah, yes.
I mean,
you're right. You're right.
You know me, I'm an engineer. This is what I do, and I was afraid to go solvent based. If I would have known you 5 years earlier, I might have been a solvent based processor. It's, I didn't think I could do it at home safely. Now there's more information out there, but I still feel like people jump to solventless because it feels less risky.
And it's a way lower entry, like barrier to entry. Let's be honest. Like, there's a time that, you could kind of get into this with trim bin and a fucking hair straightener. You know what I mean? Like, obviously we're spending thousands of dollars on it now, but it's still going to take way more to get into the hydrocarbon side of things, at least to do it safely. I've got to take off, but hey, Chase, I just want to say I really appreciate the conversation tonight. It's been fantastic. I do want you to continue with these two guys, because these two guys are the professional hash makers. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to solventless or anything like that. But my last question, man, is is it just me, or are those some giant fucking books on your bookshelf behind you? What's going on there?
Yeah, this one is giant. The other ones are medium-sized, I would say. But
they look like big readers to me either way. But yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a giant one.
I just thought the bookshelf was a lot closer.
Oh, I'm like when I talked about the depth of field thing. I'm like, this is like camera trickery. Like, I can't tell how far away he is. This thing looks like it's Encyclopedia Britannica, fucking 1900 through 2025. What?
He's actually sitting in front of a shoebox. It's not a real background.
It is the Encyclopedia Britannica of like drug-induced
Nice.
artwork from New York. So
Love it. Love it. Cheers, guys.
Take care for Growly. Cheers. So let's get back to data.
yeah, should we take a dab first? I'll take a dab off of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, so we were talking about data collection, and I've seen some of your posts over on X, and I wanted to highlight one for people in case they don't follow you right now. And it's and I lost it. You have a little web-based tool that you've been showing off lately. Which is much more accessible, right? Where's this at? Present. Horrible. Let's try this. So this is almost like an easy way to get into data entry and data tracking, I guess. I really liked this idea. Very, very simple little application for someone. But this is kind of the basics that I track as well. It makes a lot of sense. Is this something you're planning on releasing to people, or I'll let you finish your dab. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I'm off torch loud mode. Yeah, no, we're testing this right now. So anybody who wants to take it for a spin is more than welcome to. There will be glitches, there will be bugs, but it's fun. It's a new version of what we had, which was our first project ever, which was a data tracking app for flower rosin to start, and then we included the rest of the process. We got a lot of users, but it was very slow to use. And this one, we've prioritized making it as fast as possible, faster than paper notes. So
you had another screen on a different post. I can't seem to find, but actually showing more of the batch data that you were collecting, and automatic calculation of flour to hash and hash to rosin, right? I believe you had those percentages on there on one of the screens.
Exactly. Yeah. The main idea of this one is just, again, like as fast as possible yield tracking.
Yeah. So I like that. And you said it earlier, which is, collecting data like I do, it's not for everybody. But I think it's useful for everybody. Where you're coming in is you're making actionable insights and allowing people to number one, easily collect the data. That's super helpful. And then once you have it, what do you do with the data? And I think that's where you were getting into the AI and talking about the future of it. And, how do you teach the general person who doesn't, doesn't understand how to read data? I do a lot of data work. We run a very large factory. We have a lot of IoT devices, and my business partner loves to look at my data, and he will misread the data every fucking week, every single time, and will completely send you down the wrong rabbit hole if you're not careful. And so that's the danger with collecting this much data and not giving them a useful interface, right? I think that's an interesting path to take with it, with the AI and teaching users.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we started this pre-AI, like right before GPT became a really big thing. And, we started working on the data tracking app. Like I said, that was the first thing that we did. And it was very rigid. We were very thorough. We tracked everything down to what bags you were using and have this amazing bags visualization and like all these different things. And it was awesome, but it was so slow to use. It was too thorough. So right. What's interesting now post AI is that what AI is so good at is like interpreting stuff and then also resurfacing stuff if you want to reference something that you did. So it's almost just like great timing for us, because that's exactly what a hash maker needs. They need something that's flexible in terms of the level of detail they can enter, and then also can add on more later, and then can retrieve that stuff very quickly. So I think in a nutshell, that's the most like valuable thing that you can give to someone. It's like, I can try to come up with cool charts and all of this stuff all day, and like some things do boil down to a chart, and that is the easiest way to look at it. But a lot of this now is just like, we're experimenting with text-based interfaces, and like what you were showing on screen, we have built also a chat bot around so that you can fill in your batch data that way if you want to. And I think that is, for now, like the way to bridge the gap of, again, like what I picture is a hash maker who has, I've seen this a few times, has a lab assistant, and like the lab assistant is supposed to be writing down all of this data, and like they don't give a fuck about what's going on. They're getting paid like minimum wage and seriously don't care. And they're just not, they don't care. So it's like, if you can, make a really good version of that, that's just like writing down everything that comes to your head, I'm like, that's interesting, and then you ask it, hey, what did the strain do last week? And it just tells you immediately. Like, to me, those are,
with the really cool part about it is now I have a new strain, and I can give it, like, maybe I tell the chat bot the lineage, but I've never grown and processed this, but I tell it the lineage, and then it goes, oh, well, you've processed this before from that lineage and this before from that lineage, and now this is what I recommend for pressing temperatures, and
exactly,
giving you at least a base starting point that's closer of a guess than, I don't know.
Yeah, recording
100%.
the information is one thing, but then using it, what's the word I'm looking for? Processing it and then utilizing it on demand like that is very valuable.
Yeah, and having it being able to just come up with things that you weren't thinking of. That's where the AI benefits that I've seen. So my grow used to be powered by a neural network. I fed data in, it pooped data out. It told me what I needed to change room parameter wise to keep things in check. That worked great for a decade. And then AI came out, and I started feeding data in there, and I'm like, it's giving me so much more that I never thought. And that's where as an app maker, if you can take the really complex things and feed them to the layman and give them, here's simple steps to start you off. That's really cool.
Exactly. There's two things that are super interesting that I think we can unlock now, which is what we always wanted to do, predictive yields and analytics and stuff like that, which was like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? We're going to have to acquire so much data. Well, now we don't need to that much, because like you said, we can use the AI. Sure, it'll hallucinate a little bit, but we can then ground it in actual batch results that are going to reduce that a lot. And I think like that is also an immediate way that we can provide value to hash makers on the data side. It's like, a lot of these guys are already using ChatGPT for stuff, and it is pretty good, but it's also hallucinating a lot if you ask it very specific hash questions. And that's a very simple layer that we can provide, because we have a lot of that. We can, again, contextualize it with your batch data, so it's grounded in that. And like, that's another just very small aspect of like, ask it something, get an accurate result about a terpene boiling point. It's not going to hallucinate some crazy stuff.
Right.
The other, to me, really
are you looking
thing,
at like community level data sharing as well, or individual? So everyone processing is feeding, right? So now you're learning. That's where the real powers comes from, right? That much data.
I think the ideal end game is that like a lot of people maybe sign up to share their data in exchange for getting access to other people's data. You can use it privately if you want, so you don't have to, but you can also open up that two-way communication. I think that
Right.
makes it fair too, not
100%.
just consuming data, but having to share it yourself. Definitely that's super interesting, and I think a critical part, and like for us has always been a huge, just like when someone tells you that a strain washes at a certain percent and you're about to buy $200,000 of it, how do you know that they're telling you the truth? And how do you validate that? Like, that's a very interesting challenge to solve that you can with, kind of trusted wash data. So definitely community aspect. The main problem though, that I really like that we keep coming back to is it is even just looking at your own data. Like I still think that 98% of people use paper notes. I mean, like even now in 2025, like most people use it, and you ask them about a strain and they literally are like, I don't know, I'll have to go find it. And
That's
it's
funny.
just, the community aspect, yes, it's hugely valuable if you're buying a cut, if you're thinking about doing something. But even I'm just like, dude, if you looked at your own data, like just get it into a spreadsheet, even at worst. Like, but it's hard, and it's like I think that is the most important thing. If we can make it immediate for any hash maker to record all of their data so that they can then just make a product, see how they like it, how their customers like it, and then come back and repeat or change that recipe, that's super valuable. Then the community stuff to me is like part two of that, because we need to get everybody recording high quality data first. But
Right.
that's the other interesting thing with AI is like it's so good at also just literally parsing your handwritten notes that we're like, maybe that is the input. Maybe we just set up a camera and you just fucking handwrite stuff and then you scan it at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
it's possible.
I would love to see, like Fagroli hinted at it earlier. I can't remember the name of the Insta account that does the really good macro photography, and they were using AI and they were tracking all the the trikes, and they were
Surface
counting
area, I think.
Schwale.
Swale. There you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. He's
And then
amazing.
But being able to track the head size, the cell wall thickness, like being able to classify your trichomes and then take that data in, because now, like we know, same strain, 2 grows, your humidity was off by 10% in the first one. You don't know what that second, what's the wash going to be like? Different.
Yeah.
So being able to bring in, that I've kind of gone end to end where, so I go from seed all the way through. I have every 5 minutes all the way through until it becomes rosin. I know what temp it was at, what humidity, what was pressed. Now I don't have the data from the freeze dryer. That's where you piqued my interest there with what you were offering, and you started talking data exports as well, which I think is a good thing for more advanced users like me, right? Being able to get our own data is a huge thing. Nothing worse than someone walling on your own shit, right? So it's like, it's my freeze dryer. If I'm going to pay you, can't you give me the data?
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's an interesting thing actually, because like I'm a power user of much software. Like I rarely ever want to work with, like I only want to take my own data out if your interface is shitty. Like if you if you have a good interface though, I'm like I would rather just stay in there. I mean, like so that's an interesting thing too, because that to me, a lot of people are like, oh, I want CSVs, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do CSVs for you, but like, do you really want CSVs or do you just want something else? And so far, every time it's like, oh no, I actually just want this specific view. And but it is interesting. Like, I think, yes, there are many situations where you want to get hands-on with it yourself, especially now, again, with AI, like a lot of people will probably want to build their own AI systems, which is another cool concept even of like, how can we just make it super easy to feed into those? Maybe it's not even the hash maker who's looking at our data and it's just an AI agent. So it's it's interesting. Like there's a lot of directions. I think
AI is
also,
definitely changing a lot of development directions over the past year.
yes,
It's shifted a
that's
lot of
another
people's
like interesting aspect of the whole robotics thing, like going back to what chemical versus mechanical, like scaling that up. So I mean, you could buy a robot right now for 20 grand or something, and like probably we could train it to work in your hash lab. Maybe it's a little more than 20 grand, but like you could do that.
Mhm.
Is that the best thing to do? I don't know. You'd probably actually get higher ROI just like figuring out the best recipe to run on your Osprey. Like, you know what I
Right. Like,
mean? So
see, from my standpoint as an engineer, a lot of people they do this stuff where a human's there now, so I'm going to replace the human with a robot arm that just does what the human did,
yeah,
instead of saying, well, what if I could change the whole process so that a machine could do it better? Where I
yeah,
think a lot of people are starting to go that way. You're getting a lot of the recirculating systems, and the auto sieve with the metal screens. Now you're not seeing bags, you're seeing auto shakers,
yep.
dumping off into a water containment vessel that's sitting there and holding it chilled, so there's a lot of changes going on. I think that's a cool innovation, and eliminating some variables too, right? Because a human is the biggest variable.
Yeah, the auto sieve is an interesting example of like you're bringing consistency because the metal maybe is not stretching out like bags are. So like that's interesting in and of itself. You also then, like you said, you're streamlining the aspect of then of the human shaking the bag back and forth, let's say, and all of that is very interesting because I mean you don't need my point with the robot thing is like I agree, you don't need that, you just need that stuff to have the best recipe possible. And
Mhm.
fortunately that's pretty easy for us to do, like even just right now with how the tech is. So the lab, the direction of the lab into the future, I think, is equipment might stay kind of similar for the next few years. I don't know that there's going to be crazy innovations. Maybe it also all changes next year and everything I'm saying is wrong. But I think for the most part, like wash vessels will be a thing. And the thing that will make all of these different components better, the press, the wash vessels, they're going to get way more interactive in terms of the data. Because right now, if you want to get your data from some of these machines, it's very difficult or annoying to deal with.
Mhm.
And just, in a world where, again, you either use our AI or you build your own AI agent and it just needs a bunch of data, like we want to build the glue that connects these different things together. So I think that's the direction of where the lab goes. Maybe then in the future it gets even super automated, but like I think the hash maker will be a orchestrator of things. Maybe it's less people pulling bags but more strategic menu planning and like curating different flavors and those sort of things.
That's funny. I had something and then I lost it. That last dab. Oh, if you've ever watched like the How It Works shows, have you ever seen
Yes.
like a candy factory? Those are always the most amazing things to me because I swear I don't think there's a single candy bar made that's made the way I thought it would be made.
Yeah.
They're always made in really weird, fucked up ways. They always find a weird process of some shit that does something that makes a Kit Kat look like a Kit Kat. It's almost like we need that level of an industrial innovation instead, if we're truly going to go mass scale. I think we're wash vessels and recirculating systems. We're kind of like, you're not going to see a lot of innovation there anymore. We're kind of reaching the pinnacle of how far you can take that. I mean, you can add smarts, you can add data, which is all great, but does it change the ROI? Does it change the scalability?
One example that's really easy is like most big solventless companies, let's say, they want to be an MSO, or some of them already are. And I'm talking about the really big ones. This isn't everybody's dream, but most big ones, they want to open up in multiple states. Well, it's very hard to create consistency. Even if you open up a lab, you run the exact same strains, exact same settings for the press, for everything, it's going to come out different. And it's very hard to rely on, hey, oh, well, he said it to this. I don't know what to tell you. So I really still, I know it's like super simple and boring, and we want to build all the cool robot stuff, but it really is like, can we just get reliable data to the guy who has to make decisions about production at the end of the day? Because right now he has to go ask for phone pictures of paper, and he can't even read the dude's handwriting. So
one of our biggest innovations with our last factory build was IoT everywhere.
Yeah,
I know where every single product is in my factory, and there are tens and tens and tens of thousands of products flying around conveyors and through machines and robot arms. And it's incredible the insights you can find on weird little things from the data, such as like a roller is working a little slow, which is causing every carriage to hitch for half a second, which is screwing up your flow rate. And like, it's little things that data exposes you didn't expect. And so the visibility, and as we expand, multi-facility especially, you've got someone who's trying to manage 3 labs and they're in 3 separate states. And how do they make sure consistencies across the board? That's how you do it. It's data.
On the note of consistency across facilities, you mentioned it before, Chase, regarding the person that's doing some job along the line, i.e. packing the bags full of hash. They may be getting paid minimum wage. They may not have ever been in a press lab before. They may not understand what they're doing is wrong and or why. So trying to get that consistency as well is a tough thing when you're talking about commercial facilities and mass scale, which I have a part in over here.
It's not like people are recording training videos for every, you know what I mean? Your SOPs are handwritten, or half the time, or if you're lucky, they're printed in a freaking waterproof binder. But yeah, it's how do you get that level of consistency? Because it is an art form.
It really is. If I could do everything in the facility that I am from top to bottom, or bottom to top, however the fuck you want to word it, I absolutely would, because trying to control some of those aspects with people that genuinely just don't care, they're getting a paycheck, it's extremely tough.
I think it's like you turn them into the equivalent of a super soldier. You augment them with glasses that tells them exactly what to do as they're pressing. You make sure the software is really easy to use on the wash vessel so that it preloads the recipe and this type of stuff. And like, you empower that person to be as good as possible. That is the most interesting aspect of automation to me. How do you make it so that, yeah, I agree. Like, a lot of this, when I say, a guy who's getting paid minimum wage doesn't care, well, they're not getting teed up to care. They're getting teed up to a very shitty situation where it's like, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, you handed them a notepad and
exactly. So how do you make them like the equivalent of like, even, I don't know, like, even if you're in the base level of the military, you're getting a HUD and like seeing shit.
I like the AR glasses idea. That's pretty slick. That's cool.
I think those are like, like a lot of people think, what does automation look like in the hash lab? Like, oh, it's just massive wash vessels and like conveyor belts and stuff. And like, yeah, for packaging, for other stuff like that. But there's also this whole range of, again, just like, I agree, it's an art. There's a huge component of it, which is the humans deciding what to curate. And just like, how do we make that, super easy and seamless? Like ideally, you're just like going straight from thought to note digitally. I mean, that's still a little bit far. So it's like voice, it's like goggles, you know, like really good screens, even just iPads around the Hash Lab. So
Yeah, I mean, we did that, gosh, at a major Texas grocery chain back 1995. I did touch screens in the back that
wow.
were it was for turning old steaks into hamburger. Basically what it was. It told you, they scanned every item, and on the screen it told them what to do, and they did it. And then all
Wow.
touchscreen, and it had to be able, because of where it was, it had to be able to be pressure washed. So I mean, that technology exists to have a good touchscreen in a Hash Lab that is completely sanitary, can be washed every day, you know, because those are things that we also have to think about, is cleanliness. And that's the worst part about bringing technology in, is cleanliness is such a pain in the ass. Like,
Yes.
I mean, the AR glasses is cool of an idea of it. Like, I don't want to share glasses with somebody. So,
Oh,
you
no,
know,
for sure.
so now you
Yeah.
got to have your own, and then you got to have like cubicles to put them in with a little, I think of the barber UV cleaning them out type of thing.
Yeah. My bet is also that that will just become inevitable. Like everybody will have that in 2 years, which I could also be wrong about, but it's getting cheaper, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, yes, right now we have to be on a phone and maybe we can be voice, but in 2 years, are we thinking how is the hash maker going to want to enter data? Or is it all going to happen behind the scenes and the machine will record it automatically? That's the part to me that is still, I see that happening with stuff like, you know, your recipe from your freeze dryer, your Osprey, or your press feeding in, and you can see that and you can replicate it. I don't know that it will always, like, there's certain things that are easier for you to think out loud and say, in the same way that, like, you know, when we're um coding now, like a lot of it is just done in plain English, you know, like it's just, I think there's some stuff that is easier to convey that way. And so I believe it'll be a combination of data that gets pulled in automatically and stuff that you say, and thinking about how you blend those two things together. You know, is it just a microphone that records everything? Is it cameras that's seeing what's happening with your hash? Like there's so many different directions.
Couple of cool ideas
go.
here. It would be interesting to see hash equipment start working like as Matter devices, so that they could be automatically added to a smart home, not really a home, but a smart lab type of a system, and expose their data that way. Just kind of a shared ecosystem.
That's what we're trying to do, especially now with like we have a foundation with the freeze dryer stuff that we didn't have before, you know, and it's a lot more realistic now to build out that web. And yeah, that's like, you know, like we well, it's actually tricky, you know, because it's the same thing of what I said of like with the exporting data in a way, you know, like, yes, I want to build the glue that is platform agnostic. At the same time, I recognize that low temp is very much trusted amongst the whole industry right now and is like making really good shit, you know, and
But
I think that
I pulled data from my LT3.
On the desktop app,
Yeah.
we made the desktop app.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah, that was like our first ever. So when we made the data tracking app manual first, and then we started working with the low temp guys, we made the desktop app. We haven't worked on it in a while, so in full transparency, it needs love.
Well,
I played with it originally, working out to get a commercial facility, but I think I got lost in quality, or excuse me, quantity at the time, because there's a big wrestle back and forth in the commercial industry. I need to get back on it. I want to check that out again, because we do record data a lot more accurately right now. we try to record from flour to rosin, but we don't necessarily record where that flour comes from within the facility yet, which is another valuable piece of information.
I think we talked about this before, Pedro, right? Like, don't you take like handwritten notes initially and then someone enters it? Is that how? Weren't you?
I'm only in control of what I enter, but my department enters everything on a laptop as it's happening.
Oh, okay. I was thinking
we
there was
should get both of you using even our current beta as a test, and I guarantee it'll be the best feeling software that you've ever used for Hash.
As you were talking about that, I might be interested in that because we currently just use Excel, and there's a lot of ways we're utilizing it or using it that processing the information or makes processing the information difficult, especially if you have inaccuracies in the recording of the data. I'm sure you nerds know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But
garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, exactly. Recapturing and replaying that information, i.e., looking it up to use it again, is kind of difficult. So yeah, maybe we should talk.
No, this is like, I mean, I think Excel has a place. If you're an Excel wizard and you're paying a dude 150 grand a year just to do Excel, I mean, sure, keep doing that, I guess. Like that's probably fine. He probably has a wicked spreadsheet. But
Right.
if you're not and you want something that's like, I mean, it's just the equivalent of like when it feels like you're walking uphill when you're using Excel. You're like combing through stuff, entering stuff slowly. This is like driving a sports car downhill.
Yeah, and I'm relatively good in using Excel, but there's some things that you'll do, and later on you'll want to reformat, and historically reformatting is very difficult.
Yeah, I would say next week we will have it so that our app can talk to a spreadsheet, and you could edit a spreadsheet from our app. You could pull stuff in. You could edit the spreadsheet and pull stuff in and have two-way comms that way. Because I, at the end of the day, like, yeah, people are going to use spreadsheets. And especially if you're passing stuff off to a metric guy, like I said, for us, best case scenario is just pass them a spreadsheet and be done. We don't even need a metric API. Most people don't care about it. So I think that is a critical part. But when you're in the lab, you don't want to deal with that. And when you're, like you said, looking something up, hey, what do I have right now? Or what status is this at? You also don't really want to deal with that,
And you can look up the last press, but you can't look up the average of all of those honey bananas pressed.
Yeah. And that's the really great timing for us part with AI is just that was such a hard thing for us to figure out before. How are we going to do all of this in a meaningful way? And now we don't have to decide what's meaningful because you can. Like, we don't have to curate the charts for you. You just decide
ask
what you
your
want to
data
compare.
questions. It's
exactly.
It's incredible. Yeah.
It's so much easier, and
we
it's
definitely
better at the end
we might
of the
have
day.
to have a conversation about that, because I know that that's something that would be very valuable to their owner. He's talked about that in the past.
It's like I see people who are like, they walk into the lab, they're like, I need to know what the yield for this is. Like, we have to give the grower a report. And they're like, I don't even know where to find that, and I'm just like, you asked me about a bug that we had 6 months ago, and I could go in and find that in 2 seconds in our issue tracking software. And it's like, if anything, it's more important for the resin data than that, like that's, so to me, it's just like super second nature of like, we got to get everybody that level of insight. And then there's a lot of cool shit that you can do, but even just at a base level, like that's just I mean, Tableau's cool, man. But again, it's like, it's comparing, you can get a Mercedes S-Class. You don't want to take that on track. You want to take a G3 RS on track. You want to take a race car on track. This shit is built purely for solventless. It doesn't have to support all of these other things. And Tableau is good at supporting all these different business cases, you know, and maybe for a really big company, at the end of the day, you're going to assemble your reports in that, and it's going to go to the business analytics guy into that. But for the hash maker in the lab, I want you driving a GD3RS on track. That's what it should feel like when you're using this software, you know, every input designed exactly for what you're doing. And then when you need to recall it, it's second nature, and you're not fighting against a general business analytics software, which is optimized for an analyst.
Right. Yeah. The best way to get software adoption is to stay the hell out of the way of the people trying to do the work.
Yeah.
Just let them do it really quickly and move on. If it stops them and it takes 10 minutes out of their day every time that they got to do this every hour, it's just annoying and they're going to complain about it. But if you're 2 seconds out of every step, it doesn't matter. You just type it in real quick and they get actionable insights at the end of the day. It's like, it's a no-brainer to add it to the process.
A spreadsheet and Microsoft Dynamics and like all these big ERP softwares are like, dude, like, I mean, to be totally honest, I don't even think they're good at all. Like, I was going to say they're good for an analyst, but I actually just don't think they're good at all. I think they're from like the 90s and like
you don't want to know
outdated.
how much we paid consultants every single month to maintain our dynamics.
Yes. I mean, even cannabis companies are spending 6 figures a year on this shit. And I'm like, it's just like, you don't even, I mean,
you don't need fucking SAP to run a cannabis company. I'm sorry.
You don't. And it's getting to the point now though, where like, I don't know if, you know, okay, like ChatGPT is getting so good to where you can just dump stuff in there with their combination of memories and also then being able to upload any type of document at all. It's becoming this resource where you can just kind of dump stuff in, ask it anything. I don't know, you know, that they're ever going to optimize for like super specific software applications like cannabis, like maybe they do, who knows? Yeah. But I think that's the most like, that's the biggest change now, I guess, is just like, yeah, how you can input stuff so quickly compared to before. You would have to set up a nice dashboard or a spreadsheet or these different things. And it's just,
verify
I don't know.
The data is 100%. Now it can clean up potential errors. It can understand when something was an input error.
Exactly.
My business partner had a crazy use case the other day. So we print custom apparel. And we sent in for a wash test against somebody who's coming to us. They run it through thousands of washes and they come back with a PDF that explains every step of it, but it is 200 and some pages long. It is a fucking book. And he just like, I don't know what the fuck to do with this. I'm like, it's a PDF. Give it to ChatGPT. So he did. And he asked for an executive C-level summary and it gave him a 1-pager that is now like the best thing we've ever read. It completely broke down why our process was better and explained it in a way that can it be explained as an elevator pitch, right? You can walk up, I can give you a 30 seconds and you can be like, holy shit, that makes sense. And if you want the data, here's 250 pages to go read, but we didn't read it. Like,
exactly. Yeah. It's just the best time to be making, I think, something for, well, it's for the last 4 years, even not just post AI. It's a really good time to be making something for hash makers that just makes it really easy to track data because it's super needed. It's very unsexy, which also then makes it slow to get adoption, but that's cool. Well, you know, like
on that note, what's been one of your most surprising like things you learned from data in Hash? Like I know you posted some crazy ones before, some different ones.
I would say the most crazy thing is, I mean, just that most everybody's favorite hash maker is not ever tracking any data whatsoever and is just like totally making it up on the fly or running the same recipe every time. There's very little optimization happening. Like small percentage of the companies that use our stuff even are thinking about hash theory like that. And I always thought that every single person was thinking of that, but
dialing it all in.
I
that was,
change
yeah.
data on the fly and I record it on the fly as well.
I think it's like the top 1% of hash makers are doing that only. It's really to me, that was the most surprising. The second most surprising thing is kind of what I was saying earlier. I thought, the same. You want to just preserve as much terps as possible, make it an accurate representation of the resin. And since I have come around on like, no, there needs to be a lot of manipulation and experimentation. Schwale being a great example of someone who has tried to emulate different air drying tech and things by manipulating the freeze dryer, sieving, post, pre. Those are really, I think, just like interesting aspects of data applications, and to me are surprising that, yeah, you might not want all the terps. Maybe you do want to change it a little bit. Maybe you do want to, whip stuff together and emulate an air dry consistency, and other times you don't. But that and yeah, just like with respect to drying specifically, I think that's one that has really, for me, especially over the last year, become a big realization, is like not a lot of people are paying attention to how dry they're getting their hash every time. And for me, pure bro science right now, but I notice a huge difference between hash that has been dried for a quote unquote long time versus hash that is what I would consider under dried. And it's very consistently super harsh, very wet looking, but at the same time, not that terpy and not that tasty. And the stuff that's a little bit drier, and yes, there's tons of variables, strain, cuticle type, all of these different things, but the stuff that's actually a little bit drier sometimes, not the ultra wet stuff that has been freeze dried, in our case, longer, is tastier, much smoother, and better. And that was like, when we first started, we thought it was all going to be about, get it out of the freeze dryer as soon as possible, run really low temperatures, all of this stuff. That's what everybody talks about, but it's way more nuanced than that.
Somebody clip that shit. Somebody clip that shit.
No, the dryness thing is huge. Like,
yeah, one of my most surprising was when I got a FLIR camera and seeing what I thought was dry and then hitting it with a FLIR and go, oh, maybe not. Like,
yeah,
you can actually see that there's still a chunk of ice in the middle, or a chunk of water, basically, right? And like, holy shit, it was eye-opening, because I didn't realize, that's what, well, obviously, the thickness of the patty and which tray is it on? How are you putting it on the top of your freeze dryer? You're putting it at the bottom. I've started to dial in my freeze dryer, but of course, every freeze dryer is fucking different then too, because I think that's where, you were talking the higher end models. That's where we get into much more consistent unit to unit, even probably. Whereas Harvest Right's not quite unit to unit like that, at least not on the
No, perfect. I mean, that's a perfect example, actually. Like, just today in our office hours, we had someone coming in with a Holland Green Science, couldn't figure out the recipe, having trouble getting it dialed. We have another guy who is an expert. He just gives his recipe. He's like, go try this. It's going to work for you. I couldn't do that for you with the Harvest Right, because I have to ask you 10 questions first. What is your vacuum level? What size are you running? How big are your batches? So you're definitely right. There's way more consistency, to the point where I think you could pretty reliably predict like a positive or a good recipe, with the Holland Green. But with the Harvest Right, it does take a little bit more finessing to get, when I load the shelves this way, it works better. You have to figure it out on your own, kind of,
You really do. Thankfully, I haven't totally fucked it up yet, but I've come close a few times.
Yeah, no doubt. I have actually fucked it up.
Well,
once personally.
No, I think
commercially.
I think your fuck up is the reason I haven't fucked up, because
Yeah,
I started monitoring before Hashy, had the ability to monitor if your temperature was going out on a craziness. Because your app will do that for it. If you
yeah.
what is it, your thermostat or whatever the hell that stops your damn shelves from heating up. Because those things can just go on a runaway, and you would actually see that in your data then.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
We've definitely saved a few batches. Yeah, we've saved also that situation from when you have a power outage and then it flips and then that happens, and it's a bummer. It's definitely a bummer when it happens, and I think everybody at the minimum should have a camera aimed at that thing or something,
Right.
just to make sure. But
That's for sure. The most common in the prepper community is just
Yeah.
at least a $20 blink camera, something cheap at it, a little bit of saving.
Well, hey, gentlemen, you guys are absolutely welcome to carry on the conversation. I have to be out at exactly 11 o'clock tonight, my time. But Chase, seriously good conversation, and I think we should hook up on the backside and see what happens.
yeah, any time, I'm always down. You guys can get early access to any of our stuff and give
It was
feedback.
great having you tonight, man. Really appreciate the conversation. It's always fun talking data. Absolutely love it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yes, absolute pleasure.
We'll have you on again, man, and we'll have to get you on with some other hash makers too with us. We have some lots
Anytime.
of good friends. So
That'd be some good conversation.
for sure.
Anytime.
Take care, everyone.
See you guys.
Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Peace.